Hi, this is Audrey Blair, and you're listening to the Change is Hard podcast, episode 22. Hello and welcome. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. And today I want to continue talking about one of the four P's in my leadership framework, which is pivot or pivotability. And I often get asked how I went from my career in IT to launching a coaching practice. And it's not something that happened all at once or even in a few months. It was a combination of decisions and micro pivots that I made. And as you know, I primarily help clients elevate their influence and leadership through the four P's, which are performance, productivity, promotability, and pivotability. And that last one, at the end of the day, you want to know that you are not stuck and that you are not trapped in any situation or any circumstance, and that you can use your leadership influence to make moves that are either going to be more fulfilling or more aligned with your current stage of life or what it is that you envision yourself doing. And especially in where we are now, this current climate, we are in a cycle of layoffs. There's just a lot of layoffs happening. And for some, they're going to be able to pivot relatively quickly and smoothly, others not so much. But for me, I decided and I knew for a while that I didn't want to be where I was. In the current role that I was in and the current organization that I was with, I knew for a while, and it really didn't have much to do with the organization. I had made that shift to that org thinking that it would fulfill something that was lacking in my previous role. And I realized quickly that that wasn't it. And so once I decided what that next move was going to be, which was for me, it was about exploring and figuring out what coaching was and learning more about that. And then ultimately, I wanted to get back into having my own business. I had a small consulting practice many, many years prior, and I enjoyed it. And sometimes I regretted not sticking with that and staying with that. I ended up going to another organization. And so that led me down another X number of years in corporate. But I knew that I wanted to go back and build a practice and build a business. And for a long time, I thought I would continue doing that in consulting. But then as I learned what coaching was, I decided that was the missing link for me. That is what I knew that I was good at, but I also knew that I had a lot to learn. And with that in mind, I had to make these small, intentional, strategic moves so that that could happen. And that is the definition of a micro pivot. It's a small but intentional change in your responsibilities, your projects, most importantly, I think, your mindset that then moves you closer to your long term goals. And what I'm talking about today, is about exploring these new possibilities without forcing you to fully commit to any major transition yet. Sometimes I think we get overwhelmed or feel like once we make a decision, it's a big leap, and it doesn't have to be that. You can make small shifts and small changes in order to make that happen. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. Some decisions were larger than others, but many of them were just these really small things. So here just are some examples of how a micro pivot can show up. You can take on a new project that is more aligned with your future career interests or where you want to move into. So exploring what other options are out there for you to take on a small project. Shifting your mindset from this is my job to how can I use this role to prepare me for what's next. I think that's a big one because, especially if you're starting to feel stuck or if you're feeling a little bit trapped in where you are, or maybe you're even getting a little bit bored, you can think about it differently. You can think about it in a way that how can I leverage where I am right now to start preparing me for what's next? And that was big for me. I started doing that because I then started looking and creating opportunities for me to test things out and do things differently. Another thing you can do is build new relationships with people that are in the space that you're interested in. I didn't know too much about what coaching was, but I had a friend who had been talking about it. We grabbed lunch one day and we had lunch, and I just asked her a bunch of questions and what it was about and what it meant because I didn't know the difference between consulting and coaching or therapy and mentoring. So I needed to get a broader understanding of what it was. Another thing you can do is think about, well, what new skill do I need to develop? And when you think about that, you can start setting yourself up for bigger opportunities. I knew that I needed to shift my mind from consulting to coaching, but that was a new skill for me. I needed to figure that out. And then also, another big one is changing the way you communicate or position yourself in your current role. And I just started positioning myself differently. Even in my current role, I started positioning myself more as a coach than a consultant. I started talking to my clients in that role more from a coaching aspect than I did from a consulting aspect. And this is why those micro pivots matter because they allow you to test out these new skills without a major risk. So you don't have to dive in first. So I was able to test out things that I was learning in coaching school. I could then bring it back to my role. And fortunately, I was already in a role where I was dealing with clients and working with them through digital transformation. But I was able to test out just small shifts and how I talked to them and the questions that I asked and how I showed up very differently. And I could see the difference that it made. And I got encouragement from that. And I learned a lot from that. The other thing that it helped me to do is that it allowed me to stay engaged and fulfilled. And in the role that I was currently in, I was kind of a forced pivot within the organization. They were going through reorg. I got placed in another team, another role, which in my mind was backwards. It wasn't presented that way. It wasn't that way. But in my mind, it felt like that because I thought, gosh, I've been here. I've already done this. And I was feeling a little bit stuck. But by being able to think more about a micro pivot, I then could stay engaged and be a lot more fulfilled in that role. And as I said, looking for those opportunities and then creating opportunities both to my external clients as well as internally with my team. I started doing a lot more coaching in my leadership with the team than I did before I considered what my next move was going to be. The other thing is you get to start building credibility and readiness for your next move. So, by taking on these new challenges within your existing job, you can start creating a record that helps you with your future pivot. This is where you can create stories. This is where you can create those examples. So if you are looking to go to another role within the org, if you want to try another business unit, if you want to transition your skills to a different part of the organization, this is what allows you to build that credibility within yourself, but also tell those stories so that you can specifically talk about how you can help wherever it is that you're going through your skills. And it also gives you a lot of confidence. I know that I started building my confidence and my readiness. And in fact, because of that, my first paying clients were clients that I was able to get while I was still in coaching school and I'd still had my last job. And so it allowed me to start build that credibility not just externally but internally as well. And then another big shift here is you can reduce some of the fear and uncertainty around making some of these moves. These small shifts, they feel a little bit more manageable. So you can adjust gradually rather than making it an all or nothing leap. And this is why it's so important to start planning now for your next move. And you might be thinking, well, I don't know what that's going to be. That's okay. You can start considering and spend some time thinking about, where do you see yourself in the next few years? You're probably not ready to retire, but you also know that this isn't where you want to be forever. Now is this time to start thinking about that move, start planning for that move, and start making some of these micro pivots. So here's some questions. How do you figure out what your micro pivot could be or what it is? You can start with asking yourself, where do you want to grow? Is there a particular skill that you want to develop? Or is there a leadership quality that you want to strengthen? One of the things that I always do with clients is I ask them, what kind of leader do you want to be? And I have them think of 3 to 5 words or short phrases that describe the kind of leader that they want to be. And that gives us a bit of a roadmap, because then we can hone in on, well, what are the skills that you need to develop in order to get there? And it's important for you to know, where is it that you are going? Another thing that you can do in terms of how to figure out what your micro pivot is to look for small ways to experiment. As I said, you can look for a side project. One of the things you can do immediately, like this week, is you can just start speaking up differently in meetings. You can start seeing yourself and showing up in the room slightly differently. Think about, if I were already in that position, how might I show up to this meeting? What might I say? What questions might I ask? What opinions might I offer? And this will help you to look for some of those small ways, just to see how people respond to you and how you even respond to yourself. Another thing that you can do is you can then change the way you tell your story. So even if you're not changing jobs, you can start positioning yourself with where you want to go. That was huge for me. Thinking about seeing myself as a coach, talking about myself as a coach, presenting myself as a coach, and then changing what's on my profile on LinkedIn, or changing when I talk to people about what I do. As time went on, I was able to find and create opportunities within my organization to make that happen. I did a group coaching program. I coached other leaders. I coached peers, and it ended up being a great opportunity for me as I then made my way out the door. Another thing that you can do is you can embrace good stress. If you listened to last week's episode, I talked about the difference between good stress and bad stress. And micro pivots, they should feel challenging, but not overwhelming. And here, if it's too easy, you're not stretching yourself enough. If it's too stressful, maybe you feel overwhelmed and you hold yourself back. But you want to find that balance about, what can I do right now to push myself and start building that momentum for whatever is coming up next. Right. So when you think about pivots, instead of thinking about the big move, because you have to build that momentum in order to turn the corner all the way, that happens once you build the momentum for some of these micro pivots that I'm talking about. So if you're feeling stuck, don't wait for the big opportunity to drop in your lap, because some of the things that drop in your lap may not be what you're looking for. It could be a forced pivot. And if you're not ready to pivot when you're being forced to pivot, that can be even scarier. So here's your challenge. Identify one micro pivot that you can make in the next 30 days. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be one small shift that aligns with your future vision. It can be one small thing just in the way that you think about yourself, in the way that you see yourself. And that will help you to then start stepping in that space. And of course, if you need help figuring that out, your next move, let's talk. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, or in the show notes, I'll drop a link where you can schedule a time with me. And I'd love to help you to strategize your next pivot through creating micro pivots. So that's it for today. Please don't forget to subscribe and follow, and share it with someone who is thinking about their next career move. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you the next time.